In the 90s, like Japanese companies were top of the world. Since then, you look at the last 30 years and people talk about it as the lost decades or whatever. Part of that is I think just Japan never really got software. Handing out flyers, putting like ads in local newspapers. We talked to the real estate developer, like, is it possible to add another layer of soundproof glass? And then it took then a month for us to get a quote back. And this quote ended up being $40,000. We realized that, okay, clients are now searching online. So let's help you run and build your business online and connect with the clients directly.
So like when you say that to them, like what's their reaction? Building a company in Japan as a foreigner, how did you actually get through that? Well, Jordan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, Steven, thanks for having me. Likewise.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to this conversation because one of the things that fascinates me about founders, I'm really curious about sort of their motivations, and someone like you who, is a foreigner,
sure.
Building a company in Japan of all places where, it has that reputation as a sort of a very closed off culture. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you built.
Sure.
But also about your background, what brought you to Japan in the first place, and maybe we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I mean, I would start by saying that I don't think of myself as like a foreigner building a company in Japan or that I came here for that purpose. And I think starting a company anywhere is really hard. And there's a reason that a lot of, in the States as well, you have a lot of immigrants that have started companies. And I think it's something like, over half of the unicorns have been started by immigrants. And it's because they usually come with a different perspective and different experiences and, less respect maybe for the status quo. But, being here, and loving to be here and thinking, in my biased view, that it's the best place in the world to live. There's also other experiences and networks and perspectives that I have that let me say that, hey, maybe there's a better way to do this, not for myself as an outsider, but as someone who loves the culture and as a citizen, or as a permanent resident rather, for everybody to benefit. And so, so I, as you can tell, I'm not Japanese. Naturally,
I noticed.
You noticed? So I was born and raised in New York. My parents were artists. I ended up going to college in California. So I was very geeked out all through high school. I was a kid who was staying up all night, programming on the computer out of parts that I built. So I used my babysitting money to buy computer parts, built my computer, was programming games. And within games, I was fascinated at the time, believe it or not, with AI, which is a very different beast than it is right now.
But what was it like back then?
So back then, the race car for AI, so to speak, was in video games. That's where you could apply it the most, and that's where you could use a lot of the latest things. And so it's okay. Can I write an algorithm to play against myself that can beat myself if I know what the algorithm is and stuff like that? And so that was a lot of fun. And I thought that my childhood dream, or in high school, was I want to grow up and build AI for the next generation of video games. That was my high school when I grew up kind of thinking. And so I think at the time the largest markets for video games was California and Japan. Right, that's where a lot of the industry was. You had a lot of the top players, and in Japan, the Sonys, you have the Nintendos, you have a lot of the major franchise hits. And I went to USC for college, and they had the best video game programming curriculum at the time.
I see.
So my freshman year, I kind of convinced some of my teachers to let me out of like the first year classes. And the first semester I took, it was like CS 4.6 was like artificial intelligence course in senior level, and there's like video game programming courses that was taught by some like visiting professors from electronic arts. And I was like, I'm in college, I'm free, I can I'm in a different state, I'm in California, away from home, sort of my independent life. And I can do the things that I'm passionate about. And that led me to first realize that I didn't know that much as much as I thought I did. Right? In high school, programming all through the night, people, oh, you're a tech genius, but you figure it out as you go. I was definitely not a tech genius by any means, but I was fascinated with problems and how to kind of use logic and math and programming to solve problems. And I think that's really what computer science is your logic, and you're solving problems, and you're doing it in a way that you can use technology to scale. And for me, that was a lot easier to understand than humans and emotions, right? Like zeros and ones make a lot more sense. Yeah, I did have one, a Jewish relative who gave me, B for an eye. He's like, oh, I'm going to become like a doctor or a lawyer, the whole stereotypical thing. But most of it was all very supportive of whatever I wanted to do.
Right.
And, but yeah, I mean, I think maybe right now studying computer science is maybe different from what we want in a few decades from now, right? I think, math and kind of fundamentals, and there's a lot of things that are going to be valuable. But the way that we interface with the future is it's become harder and harder to predict how things are going to be, a decade out, let alone a few decades.
At that time, were you interested in coming over to Japan because you kind of became familiar with the culture somewhat?
Yeah. So, I mean, my major was computer science, but I spent most of my time studying Japanese and playing table tennis.
Oh, okay.
I got really into table tennis and really into Japanese, which I took on the side. I would, it was probably for my second year that I started probably studying, but I, made some Japanese friends and we'd go out drinking every night and I'd practice what I learned that day. And it was a lot of fun and I really loved the culture. I had some opportunities to come out to Japan for a summer. Actually, the first summer was in 2006. So I went to China to train in table tennis. And then on the way back, I came to Japan for the first time. And just everything was better than I expected, right? I had very high expectations and just everything was lovely and people were nice and trains ran on time and it was clean and safe and it was like food. I was a very picky eater before going to Asia for the first time, China or Japan. And I came and I was like, let's eat everything as if I'm eating it for the first time. And everything was delicious. And I was like, oh, this is so nice and pleasant. And
I think I'm actually going through that phase right now, right?
I remember even when I was in China, it was, I was in, Beijing and it was a great, Peking duck place. It was right across the street from where we were staying. And I had this thing with not being able to envision the animal, right? I had seen, too many PETA videos or whatever in one of these groups or whatever. Right. But I like the taste and the flavor, but I just had to be like, okay, this is, Chinese chicken. Cause they're asked me pick it out and I'm like, no. So I've overcome that and now I, love eating without, too much undue stress. Right. But yeah, you come out to Japan, you have I don't want to know what I'm eating. I just want to enjoy it and then later find out if it's, that's, basashi, right? Raw horse meat or whatever it might be. But I think I really had reverse culture shock going back to the States. Yeah, just being in Japan was very comfortable from that perspective. Even if I didn't speak the language fluently, there was a process and there was an order and there was a structure and things made sense and things were very efficient. And I think as an engineer, things that are efficient, and things that are kind of fair in terms of structure really resonate.
Yeah.
And it was just very comfortable and very efficient living in Tokyo. And, I think maybe on my entrepreneurial journey started coming back to things being efficient or fair because there were many parts of society that were very efficient, right? You can go into a ramen shop and you can order from the vending machine and even that vending machine was there from 30 years ago. It's still just as great. And, best ramen in the world and you can enjoy it and you've done all that for $5. That's all great and wonderful. That said, outside of maybe, work, where, working as a salaryman, things were efficient for me. I worked in finance, right? So I worked at JP Morgan, for about 8 years. First I started off as an engineer. I was building out electronic trading platforms in the fixed income side of the business. And then I moved on to kind of the desk and closer to a quant's role before moving over and doing equity sales trading, and kind of growing that business using algorithms to trade on behalf of kind of institutional investors, whether it be hedge funds, asset managers, sovereign entities. And you learn as you do things, right? And so I'm very much an engineer in terms of how I think about things and I think my background and professionally. But you learn to do sales and trading and finance, and it's it's math, it's numbers, it's logic, and there's it's a lot of great people that you can interact with that where I'm able to learn a lot from them as well. So that was I think in that I was very happy with life, right? I was like, okay, I'm working in a job that I enjoy. Yeah. Every day the train runs on time. Every day the sushi tastes great. Engaged with my wife. Life was good. But anytime you realize that okay, you have a clear path to what you're doing, you get a little antsy, right? It's there's always more that you want to do. Yeah. And now that I was in equities, all my clients were asking me, but all these tech companies and, as a founder, and I was one of the few kind of computer science background people, within sales and trading. And so I'd always been kind of curious about it. And I had a lot of friends, coming out of college in California. Yeah. When I graduated in the 2000s, if you're computer science, everyone's going off to Google or Amazon or Facebook. I was a weird one who went to Japan to work in finance in 2008, right? When you're having to leave it and all that stuff. Right. So I definitely have never taken the standard path. And I think it was that as an engineer, I like programming for myself, but I wanted to solve larger and larger problems, right? So if I'm working at a tech company and, as part of a larger team, I could probably become a better and better engineer. But I think my goal was just to become somebody who could solve larger and larger problems, who can create more and more value in life. And there was a lot of really amazing engineers, and I didn't need to be the best programmer, but I wanted to solve the biggest problems. And that's where being able to apply that background to another industry like finance was really interesting and attractive. I was also excited to come back to Japan. I basically only looked for jobs in Japan. Weird again. But
you're probably in demand as well, right? There's a ton of people willing to give you any job just to.
Yes and no. I mean, I spoke Japanese at that point, but I was not a native Japanese speaker. And at the time, if you're not a native Japanese speaker, is basically you could be an English teacher, right? Maybe you could be like a headhunter, aggressive, right? Or, you would go, there's some roles in finance or like within engineering. And so I think because I started as an engineer, that's actually why I was able to do it without having perfect Japanese at the time. My Japanese obviously solidified a lot since then, and I ran my company in Japanese, and I talk regularly in public in Japanese as well. Even if I'm still not native, that's been a lot of fun being out here and engaging. I think, just being a foreigner, but also speaking the language, it lets you kind of have, I don't know, in my view, kind of live the best of both worlds, right? I don't have to have grown up here and maybe have certain stigma or certain kind of, like social pressure to conform to things the way that I might have otherwise if I'd grown up here. But at the same time, I can have like much deeper kind of respect for the culture and understanding what everyone's been through and kind of bring my own, my own personality and experiences to the table.
So here you are, and in your very comfortable and cushy job that everything is just going swimmingly. You're getting a bit antsy, and then you want to solve like big problems, but then, you prior to this, you just did not have any kind of like experience or like trying to, start a company or anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about like, I want to start a company. Right. Like that never crossed my mind. I think it's always, I just want to solve larger and larger problems. And working at JP, I was really fortunate to work with great people that let me take on more and more responsibility to solve larger and larger problems. And I think it was just that there was a completely different side of things that I wasn't experiencing and that I wanted to understand. And so Zehitomo started off with full compliance approval as a kind of nights and weekends project, where I was getting experience trying to do things and to build things and see how that side of the world works. And I thought it would let me engage with clients better as well, and knowing how startups and that culture is. But I think really quickly turned into something where I realized that, hey, if I don't go all in on this, it's a very large missed opportunity. So me and my co-founder, James, and even if we started off just kind of in an exploratory mode, bootstrapping, I think we really quickly reached a point where, using all of our personal money, and then it's, okay, do we continue to work to support this and hire a team that can work on this? Or do we go all in? And, at that point I had just had my first daughter. We had, and so I was like, family is very important. My job as well, I loved. I want to continue doing. My co-founder as well loved his job. It wasn't that we wanted to quit our jobs and do something else.
But you had already started something while you're working.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it was like a very much smaller kind of scope in terms of what we're doing in nights and weekends. But we realized, as we were stumbling forward, and figuring things out, that there was a much larger opportunity, and it would be, if we look back on this moment in time, right? I think always a regret minimization framework, right? There's three things I love to do, right? My job, loved, family, love, and this new startup, right? Which is an idea, which has, potential to have massive impact.
What was that idea that you identified? Oh, this could actually solve a big problem.
So maybe let me take a step back. So, as we were saying, working in finance was very efficient, right? I was able to be very productive and create a lot of value in what I was doing. Outside of work, getting married, moving, having a kid, is where things felt very inefficient. It was a big project to find, okay, at our wedding, who's going to be our photographer or DJ, right? When we move, okay, who's going to be able to do this? How we bought a place, that was near a train line, and near kind of a large, like highway.
Right.
And, having a new daughter, so I wanted her to have her own room. I was like, oh, well, what if she's taking a nap and here's a little bit of a sound, right? Like an overly worried new dad, right? For a reason. But reason aside, we talked to the real estate developer, like, is it possible to add another layer of soundproof glass? As we buy this place to kind of make it that much more comfortable. And they said, of course, we're like one of the largest real estate developers in Japan. We can do anything you need. And they put me in touch with their concierge team. who then goes through all these layers of subcontractors. And basically they go through their approved vendors, who go to their approved vendors. Somebody comes down from Osaka to Tokyo to measure the windows of this brand new place that's being sold by a real estate developer based in Tokyo. Right?
Interesting.
So it was like,
very inefficient.
You couldn't make up like how many hops and loops there were. And then it took then a month for us to get a quote back. Right. And this quote ended up being,
a quote back.
Yes. And this quote ended up being $40,000 or something to the tune of that.
Wow.
And now, yes, it was going to be the nicest glass, and it was going to be maybe customized, sizes for the windows that we had, and there were a number of windows. But being a stubborn foreigner, I was like, I can't accept that this is the best option, right? I don't know what the fair market value is, but like this doesn't feel right. If this was anywhere else in the world, you'd think that they're trying to rip you off, right? Or pull faster.
Right.
But this was Japan. Clearly, it's just multiple layers of inefficiency and everybody taking their quote unquote fair share. And, but what is the fair price? What are the options? I want to be able to make an informed decision. And so if we wanted to find our own solution, right, then we're calling up, on like the town page or the yellow pages equivalent that you had here, searching on websites for people's really outdated, contact information and calling up one by one, trying to find out like who could do this and what would be a fair price. And, we've, shut down our shop, or no, we don't do that type of service. And we finally get in touch with a small business, based in Kamagawa-ken, so the outskirts of Tokyo.
Right.
It was a company of 3 people that went independent a bit over a decade before. And they're like, yes, we specialize in this. This is like literally what we do.
And you just randomly called around to just land on this person.
Yep. And it took us a lot of time and energy and effort to kind of get there. And they're like, yes. And they're like the exact same, I guess, glass maker or like manufacturer that we were quoted. They're like, yes, we have that same glass. And they came by 1 week later and did it all for a tenth of the price, around $4,000 at the time. With the exact same glass. And it was just like a really wonderful experience. They even installed like our baby monitor in the ceiling for free. And had a really nice conversation.
For 1/10 of the price.
Yes. And it was like, okay, so this was the cost of all these different layers. And for the large company, they don't want to take any risk of maybe bringing the wrong person on board, right? It's their reputation on the line. That's why they have their approved vendors. That's why they have these channels. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a great experience for me. It was a lot of time and a lot of money. And it wasn't a great experience for these small businesses either on the other side, right? That are trying to be independent. And so when I was starting, Zehitomo is the name of the company. It means like with great pleasure. It's a very service-oriented word. At first I was thinking of the consumer pain, right? Of how hard it was to kind of find and hire the right person to get something done. Like, why was it so hard to find this, professional who's very good at what they do? But it actually, in that experience, one realization I had was that the service professional, the one who came and did our windows, was actually even happier to meet me than I was to meet them.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they had gone independent doing this. And we had reached out to them with a job exactly in the sweet spot of what they do.
I see.
Directly without going through all these different layers. They can come and they can solve our problem. They can be proud of the work that they're doing.
Because otherwise they would have had to do like a cold reach outs to get clients.
Yeah, and they're largely relying on kind of these multiple layers of subcontracting, right? And they're not able to build a relationship with a client or solve their needs. If they were to come over and say, oh yes, we can do this, but you have some other problems, we can also do that. Like you're not allowed to, because then it would go outside of terms. And so we, and zooming back out, you look at Japan. Japan is a country of services, no longer manufacturing. Japan is also a country of small, medium-sized businesses. And Japan's productivity has been, lowest in G7 for decades, right? So the lowest, yes, worse than G7 for decades. And so if you think just high level, how can you create maximum value for Japan? Is by improving productivity of small businesses in the services sector.
Why do you think that is, though? Because I would have thought that the common stereotype or perception of Japanese business, like they're extremely productive.
In manufacturing, yes.
I see.
So, and when it comes to services, it was very relationship heavy.
Right. Okay, that is very time consuming.
Yes. And so then you have all these people that aren't necessarily adding value through the chain or as much as they could be. And it's not like any one of them in that cog in the machine is like, I'm trying to pull faster or something like that. It's just like, that's their business and that's what they figured out how to do. And those are relationships they've had for a long time. But at the end of the day, it doesn't serve the consumer and it doesn't serve the small business in an effective way. And there's probably a lot more jobs and things that could get done if everything wasn't a huge project. And for the small business, So again, from my side, I was like, okay, we should improving productivity for small businesses in the service sector is the largest thing that we can do to support, to create value in the economy, the largest problem that we can solve. That said, talking to these small businesses, they don't really care to come off of a fax machine and run their business, online using, SaaS tools or something like that, right? The fax machine isn't their problem, right? The problem was that they weren't getting new clients, new leads directly.
Yeah.
And if you looked at all these kind of reports of small, medium-sized businesses and their problems and their biggest challenges, their number one challenge was basically getting new clients.
Wow.
And so they're relying on all these old school kind of, chains of subcontracting, but they don't have like the tools or the resources to go out and to kind of market themselves effectively. I mean, the traditional ways are, handing out flyers, putting like ads in local newspapers, but
not social media, like especially.
So some of the younger kind of generation of professionals, like freelancers that were like, personal trainers, yoga instructors, sure, they would use Instagram, or photographers might, use other different social media channels. But, the average electrician, right? They all have a smartphone now, right? They use like Line, like LINE, to communicate with family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they just haven't used that for business.
Right.
And I think the other difference is that you look at the States as a comparison point. In the States, small businesses, and this is a generalization, definitely does not apply to everybody, but, I think are really good at marketing and promoting themselves. And the quality of service varies.
I see.
Right?
So they're very good at promoting themselves.
Relatively, yes. And so some people, like, in Japan, feels like the opposite. Generally, a very good quality of service. You could argue some of the best services in the world. And ability to market and promote really varies.
Interesting.
And so, we realized that, okay, we need to, at the end of the day, of course, we want to deliver productivity to the sector. But the pain point wasn't, I want to increase my productivity as a small business. It was, I want to get new clients.
That's right.
And so I was like, okay, clients are now searching online, right? You're not here online when they search.
Yeah.
So let's help you run and build your business online and connect with the clients directly. And that was kind of the hook, you could say, come for the network, stay for the tool, inverse the normal kind of approach that you might have with other businesses. And we started off by saying, okay, hey, you want leads? We'll build a lead generation platform for you to run and grow your business online. And once you've come online, then we can do all these other things to kind of improve your processes and, increase the percentage of your time that you're actually spending doing work, right? That you're passionate about, as opposed to kind of managing your back office or dealing with invoice workflows or whatever it might be.
So that's like the first idea you had. And then how did you get your co-founder?
Yeah. So my co-founder, we started together even when we were part-time. So he was also a finance background, completely different skill set from me, but we got along really well. We were drinking buddies for a while. We actually lived in the same apartment building, which is where we joke, because we actually met in an elevator when we didn't have an elevator pitch, of course.
I see. Okay.
But we were buddies. We had very different skill sets and backgrounds. He was like a professional poker player at one point before going into finance and trading from a different perspective. So I think we had...
And a non-Japanese guy.
Also non-Japanese, but also worked in a very domestic part of the ecosystem, trading Japanese government bonds. And so I think we had a lot of mutual respect for each other. I think we're both intellectually curious. And yet we had different networks and we had different experiences. And, we can kind of, when you're going off the startup journey, you face a lot of things for the first time. And you want somebody you can turn to who's like, am I crazy? Or that happened, right? And, and so, I think even now on the investing side as well, we see that, especially first-time founders, having a co-founder is much more likely to succeed. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Even if the biggest reason for breakups is that you break up with your co-founder.
Usually, that's what I heard.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, so I think, we were bootstrapping at the beginning before realizing that we would go all in. And
does that bootstrapping involve you just going by like door to door to convince the small businesses to just like it?
Oh yeah, I mean it involved us doing everything, right? And very inefficiently, I might add. But I think we learned a lot as part of that process. It was very humbling, right? We don't have a big brand kind of behind us to support us. I think it might have even been better if we actually went door to door. Instead, we were like, oh, like that's not scalable with the economics we're looking at. We should, be doing it as kind of inside sales, and we'll call it these businesses. And I mean, my name, so Jordan, if you pronounce it in Japanese, is Jodan, which could also mean like joke. And so I pick up the phone, I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Jodan. It's like, hi, I'm joking. Like, it's like we did everything wrong in every way. But it was, half of us we can iterate on top of that. I think we did, get, a couple people to join our platform just via our network. But I think we also really quickly realized what the value proposition had to be,
Yeah.
right? And how, again, our main value proposition, less it being for us as consumers, which is what we thought as we started it,
Right.
and more as like the actual biggest pain point that we're solving right now is the small, medium-sized businesses getting new leads. And so instead of saying, hey, come register on this platform, to actually say, hey, we have a job, right? Are you interested and available to do this, right? Like, oh, here's a plumbing job in this neighborhood that's close to you. Are you interested and available? Great. Can we register you on our platform for free and connect you with these clients? And by the way, we'll have other people that are going to be making requests on this platform.
Interesting. And that's a really good pitch. So like when you say that to them, like what's their reaction?
So if they're able to do the job, then it's like, yes, they're able to do the job. And then, I think then it's how you just kind of finesse and not overly complicate like the process of registering into the platform. And we can just do all the heavy lifting for them. So, I think in terms of opening the door, that was kind of what we used. And we were able to kind of get a lot of professionals on the platform. But then retaining them on the platform, actually educating to use the platform was a whole nother story.
Wow.
And it would take a handful of iterations to get there.
So at this point, as you start to onboard all these like small businesses, you still have your full-time job, and
I think by the time we start to kind of really go to market with it, I think we had decided to go all in. By this point, but I think in the very beginning it was like building the first version of the platform, building the prototype, and we had our first engineer, Tin, who joined us. It was like February 2016. And I think that's kind of when we made the idea to kind of go much more into what we were doing. And until then, we were all just working, part-time and building the platform. And once the platform was then, we could start to use it, even though everything was broken and everything looked horrible. You could actually start to use it to match and to kind of make payments and stuff like this. That was the point where we realized that, hey, if we're going to actually make this happen, like we have to, like we can't do this kind of half-assed, so to speak. We really need to.
Right. For me, it's very just when I listen to your story, it's quite interesting because it's like a one shot, one kill. You identify the right problem to solve, and you could obviously capture some of the values by providing these type of value, but. The fact that you just nailed it in the first go.
I definitely don't think that's what happened. I mean, we iterated to get to what I was saying, right? Again, at the beginning, we thought we were solving our own problems before realizing that we were actually solving the problems of the professional, right? Us calling them up was definitely not the one shot kill, right? Like us figuring out how to sell, what was needed, what was the order that we needed to solve problems in terms of getting our platform working. So all those were things that we had to iterate to get there. And I think the speed of iteration, and that's also why it was important that we went all in on something.
Right.
Because otherwise, usually when you talk about starting a company and having a co-founder do it is, the parallels that you talk about, you jump off a cliff, right?
Yeah.
And having a co-founder means you can jump off the cliff. You're like, okay, you're crazy enough to also jump off. Okay, let's jump off together. And how do you build a rocket ship before hitting the ground? And die, right? Like, and actually having the pressure is like, okay, we're all in on this, right? Like we'll last a year, and if not, we're dead. So how we can kind of really go after scale and how we can really try to unlock as much value as fast as possible means that we kind of force ourselves to iterate. It's not like having some cushy job or being able to sustain ourselves for years. And it forces us to kind of every day to kind of pivot and iterate our thinking or our approach to kind of try new sales formations week in, week out. And to kind of build out the team and say, okay, yes, it's going to cost us more money that we don't have to hire our team right now, but that means that we can actually accelerate our learnings and we can go after and have a better chance of creating a rocket ship, or at least a parachute to then get to the base to be able to build another rocket ship and go after it.
So at the time, like raising money or getting investment, you weren't even thinking about it.
So after several months, I think when our personal bank accounts, we were raising, we were hiring more people and spending more money. And so our personal bank accounts accelerated very quickly down. And that's when we realized, okay, we need to either go back and do our full-time jobs to pay for this, or we need to raise some money. And, at first we started to talk to some investors who were like, two foreign founders think they can start a consumer-focused company here in Japan.
But by then, didn't you have some traction already? Like, hey, this is actually
working. We had like a crappy website, with a few users and like an idea and ambition, but we didn't have that much meaningful traction, right? In terms of actually solving things out. So we knew what we thought we wanted to do, but it was very, very early.
Right.
And so, our first bit was, we raised from, angels basically, right? So we had all of our friends in finance were like, no idea why you're quitting, right? Like we're both pretty good, I think, at what we did. And it's like, well, if you're quitting, don't really understand what you're building, but I want in. And
Oh
so
yeah,
we had,
that's great. That's at least you had friends
yeah.
with money, right?
Yeah, so that was fun. I mean, some friends even told me is like, uh, this is literally a hedge in case you actually make it, so you don't make fun of me for not having joined, right? And so, I mean, bringing on friends with this, it's always like, don't want to take any money that would impact the relationship if all goes to zero, right? Obviously, we're going to work our butts off to kind of make this happen, but I mean, it's almost like, you know, the amount isn't as important as kind of the intent. And then you have more people kind of betting on you, and you have more people, and it's, you know, and for every one yes, you know, there's dozens of no's, right? I think with the Angels and Friends, it was very fast to close because we had people that had reached out to us, and we thought, oh no, we're not going to need to take people's money. We're just going to bootstrap our way to a massive company, and yeah, that didn't happen exactly. So we did need to go back several months later, like, okay, now we're going to do an angel round, and we closed that. And then shortly after that, you know, our first investor that came on board was very supportive and actually introduced us to the first like full-time Japanese person that we ended up hiring onto the team. Came on and they kind of opened up a lot of the doors for us to kind of meet with the rest of the ecosystem and have some credibility.
So this was like a Japanese VC?
So this was actually 500 startups at the time.
Okay.
But it was their local team, and we had known the partners actually worked together before at JP. But I think we were both, because we knew each other, we were also that much more careful about working with each other. And we wanted to make sure that we can kind of do our due diligence on both sides, and it made sense. And it wasn't that we were just doing this because we knew each other.
Right.
And so, you know, I mean, they, so James and Yohei were great. I mean, they were launching their fund. It's now Coral Capital. And yeah, so I'm excited to kind of see them on the investor kind of build out their franchise, and they support us a lot at the very early stages, you know, leading on our seed and our Series A as well to kind of open up to the rest of the ecosystem.
Yeah. It sounds to me like you weren't even concerned about the optics that like, oh, there's a bunch of foreigner guys like, you know, starting a company in Japan. You already had an idea of the problem that you wanted to solve. You're starting to get some traction, and you can raise money. So, and plus you had your you at the time you can speak Japanese.
Yeah.
So
yes, but of course there are people who's like, you know, even if they don't say it directly, is like, okay, well, what if there's a problem where you're just gonna like pack up and leave, right? And so I mean, I was at this point like married, I have a kid, and bought a house, like I'm pretty settled in, so I don't think we faced that much of it. But yeah, I mean, actually showing that we can create traction, that we put our own, you know, capital behind this, and that we were dead set out on it. I mean, for me, it's solving a problem, right? And how do you solve a problem? And the idea of, you know, raising capital is to accelerate how fast you can solve that problem.
Yeah.
If we didn't raise money, or if we didn't start this company, it would have taken decades to maybe, you know, reach the state that we thought, oh, hey, we can maybe accomplish this in much less time, which would create a lot more value for society, or for the economy, as I mentioned, but also for society in terms of the world that we wanted to build, that we wanted, you know, want my kids to grow up into.
So right now, how many businesses have signed up, to your platform?
Yeah. So yeah, we measure it. I think it's like more than 100,000 small businesses kind of use our platform, and more than kind of like 1 million kind of consumers in Japan use the platform.
That's amazing.
And yeah, I mean, but it's still, everything has taken more time, energy, and resources than ever imagined, right? Me and my co-founder thought, oh yes, like after doing this, like in 3 years, we're either gonna be billionaires or broke out of the next thing. And it's taken a good, you know, 8-9 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
And it's and none of it has been easy.
Yeah.
But and a lot of it has been learning along the way. You know, from my side and for our team as we kind of, you know, bushwhack our way through, you know, both the startup ecosystem, where there wasn't a lot of, you know, precedence with kind of building out, you know, a massive, you know, business and hyperscaling like you did in Silicon Valley or other ecosystems. So part of that was kind of fun and wanting to kind of make a positive use case or a success case for the ecosystem. As more innovation, I think is really important. And that kind of connects actually with what I'm doing now. But yeah, I mean, in terms of solving the largest problems I care about, like unlocking and you know, improving productivity for the services sector in Japan for small businesses is so important, right? And, you know, improving in terms of society and as a consumer and how we want to live. And, you know, society's expectation when I was starting it was that my wife would do all these things that were inefficient, right? And manage all these different projects and stuff. And to me, that was the unfair. So it was like the inefficient and the unfair parts, which are, as an engineer, you know, kind of strike a chord that needs to be addressed. And it's taken a long time, but it's been really, really rewarding process. And even now when I talk to somebody, even if we're not haven't scaled to kind of the ambition that we want to be at yet, and we'll get there. Hearing people that is, oh yes, and I use it, and actually it helped me out a lot. Like it's really rewarding to now, be on the other side of the hump and have actually built a platform that can create so much value.
Is this the type of platform, do you think it's mainly useful for Japanese sort of like cultural, I guess my question is, Japan has this like a very, you talked about productivity, but it also has this element where there doesn't seem to be that much of like innovation. They're like really good at preserving things, but when you come talk about digitization and everything, things are kind of very slow, right? So let's say if you didn't start this thing, it is totally imaginable that even till now, things could just run the way things have always been. So why do you think that is? Is it just this maybe, let's say, lack of innovation? Or like, is this part of the culture? Or like, how do you what do you attribute that to?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot to unpack with addressing that. And I think there's a few different things, right? So when I was growing up, and yourself as well, like in the 90s, like Japanese companies were top of the world, right? You look at some of the largest companies in the world, it was like top 10 is really led by Japan. And since then, you look at the last 30 years and people talk about it as the lost decades or whatever. But part of that is, I think, just Japan never really got software. And a lot of the innovations have been in other different areas. Part of that has been kind of once you're at the top, how do you continue like the innovator's dilemma? How do you, like in the culture, I think at the top, and I was talking, like, for example, I was talking with the chair and board of a very, like, one of the largest companies in Japan. And we were talking about how they were so well positioned to innovate and kind of build out this really great position that could create so much value. And they're like, yes. And like, we're very excited about this. I'm like, so like, why don't you just do this tomorrow? Like, like, we wish, right? Like, so the people aren't stupid, right? People know what needs to be done, but they've just built so much structure and process and the organizational muscles like that.
It's politics and
even if it's not politics, it's just like, it's a very risk averse environment.
Right.
And because you haven't had to be risk on in order to just continue to live a happy life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one part of it on the corporate side and how those cultures have become, even though people at the top get it and get the opportunities. The other is, I think, just where talent has gone. So, I think, when I was starting a company or 10, 15 years ago, it was like, if you were a top student in Japan, you'd go work at the largest possible company, work at the Mitsubishi or whatever it might be, right? And if you were a so-so student, you'd maybe work at like a medium-sized company.
I see.
Right? And if you're kind of like, bottom of the ladder, right, maybe you'd work at a small company. And so it was really just the societal rejects that then became freelancers or entrepreneurs. Right? And I think that's what's really now starting to shift, and I'm really encouraged by, because talent is a leading indicator of where anything goes. Right? Yeah. And I think it was just the other year where you started to have more students from Tokyo University, which is like the Harvard of Japan, go into startups than into large companies. So as a leading indicator for where things are going, that's really exciting. Yeah. But so until you just haven't had as much talent going into starting new companies, you haven't had as many role models in the ecosystem of people that have built out, $1 billion businesses, $10 billion businesses from scratch. It had been a few decades, since we had a lot of those innovation cycles. And so it was like, and then there wasn't much of an ecosystem to support that, right? And even still, the ecosystem right now has developed a lot. Startup has, VC has 10x over the last 10 years in Japan. The government has this plan to 10x it again. So there's a lot of very exciting things that are going on right now. And so I think Japan is maybe like the curve and the growth in the ecosystem right now is really exciting and encouraging. And so I'm involved in a few different capacities now. So like I've transitioned to chairman of Zehitomo, and since last March, I'm like no longer in the day-to-day operations. And so there's a team, and we have a great team kind of focused on our mission and our direction. And I've now been able to spend more time in the ecosystem, both investing in kind of starting new startups and supporting other really talented, ambitious founders, and kind of trying to lay the infrastructure for those ambitious founders to go out and to raise more and to kind of go after larger and larger goals. And the government's doing a lot of great things as part of this 5-year startup plan. There's like 49 policy items that were unveiled, and there's, again, a lot of talent coming in, but there's still a number of bottlenecks that need to be addressed. And I'm working on those.
So now you're like very hands off, and then And does this company is it gonna does it have plans to IPO soon or?
Yeah. So obviously, I can't comment on exact timing, but yeah, I mean, we've been preparing for a while. I do think actually one of the problems in the ecosystem is, I mean, it's a plus and a minus that in Japan it's relatively easy to go public.
Interesting.
And
Can you share more? Like why?
Yes,
why
I mean,
why is
so
it-
you have like 100 companies a year go public in Japan, but the average market cap is around $100 million.
Oh, I see.
So it's like, a Series A or a Series B in the States. And what it means is that the ecosystem has gotten very familiar with how to go public. And there's a very standardized process, and you get your auditors and you get your security underwriters and you kind of line everything up. But what it means is that as an organization, you're de-risking into this IPO as opposed to leveraging on more risk and grant or something larger. And so even if the ecosystem says, yes, we want to have more unicorns, we want to have decacorns, most of the people in the ecosystem haven't done that before. But most people in the ecosystem have maybe seen or know some companies that have gone public. And so
in a way, going public is actually less of a risk.
yes. Yeah.
Right.
And there's a path to do it. So liquidity is great. Like Southeast Asia has like a different problem where there's not like it's much harder to go public, right? Or you maybe going to go public on NASDAQ or you can go public in a different market. So Japan is a very active public markets, which is great to have liquidity. So don't get me wrong, liquidity is absolutely a good thing. The problem is that a lot of parts of the ecosystem reinforce that path to going public as soon as possible. And as a result of the goals of the company, the goal becomes to go public. And when that becomes the case, then so what I see so often is, companies like $1 million of revenue, they start to prepare to go public and they go public when they have like $10 million of revenue. And even if the founder thinks like, okay, finally now I'm free of my restrictions to kind of focus on going public and I can now grow the company, the organizational muscles they've built to go public are so different than the organizational muscles that you need to continue to leverage on and kind of take on more risk and go after, triple digit growth.
Right.
And so that's like, it's great that there's an active IPO market. On the other hand, we need a kind of alternative to the small IPO. And we need to have more and more people that have experience building out massive companies that can be role models for the ecosystem, more global investors that can actually support founders building out globally from day zero.
I see.
So those are a couple of the areas that I'm involved in right now, both at the earliest stage, kind of encouraging kind of globally minded founders that have a reason to build from Japan.
To go global from day one, but they're built from Japan.
I think people who have that ambition. So for me, I've just find my next chapter as building the infrastructure for a decacorn in Japan.
Right.
I think one decacorn is more impactful than anything else that can happen in the startup ecosystem.
I think I agree with that. Yeah.
And you think of like the second and third order effects of all the people that have then built the muscles of hyperscale, right? That have, made their, stock options be worth millions, that the transfer of power and capital from the old school players to the people that are actually building, right? And to create a household name, unicorn, sure, like I bet most average people in Japan could not name, two of the unicorns in Japan. There's several, right? Maybe people in the startup ecosystem can name a few. But if you have a decacorn, that's what happened in the States with been Facebook or Amazon or Google, and you have these companies that become household names, and then people want to get involved. Yeah. It becomes exciting. Yeah. And those experiences, then people can start off their next companies. And so I think kind of really kicking off that wave of innovation, something at that scale is one of the most important things that can happen. And so if that's the North Star, solving the largest problem I can is how can we build infrastructure for a decacorn? And obviously for Zehitomo, I have those ambitions as well. But if I'm now no longer involved in the daily operations of that, how we can have as many shots on goal from the ecosystem as possible. And so part of that is if you're going to want to build a decacorn, there are some domestic opportunities, right? But most likely you're going to build a company that's going to be global. And
so domestically it is possible.
The market is large enough. You could have a domestic $10 billion business, right? This is possible. But if you're going to scale to that in 10 years, it probably means you're doing something that is so great. And that is because you're scaling globally as well. So I think just to increase the odds of that, much more likely to have something that is global in nature. And so how can we have more, and there's been a long history of startups from Japan that have said, okay, now we're going to try to go global. There's a large theme. And I don't think there's any real meaningful success cases of that. In this last generation of entrepreneurship.
It becomes a little bit like a buzzword where, go global, and same in Korea, same in China, everywhere, even in Thailand. Can I ask you this one?
Yeah.
Would you say, because a lot of founders I talk to, because I have most experience with Korean startup ecosystem, it's like everybody wants to go global, but the mindset is that you have to build a successful domestic product. And then once you get to a certain scale, you go global afterwards. I'm like, does that really work? Because I haven't seen a success case of that actually working out. But then, which path would you say is a better way of building? Because if you go global first, you might alienate your domestic audience?
Sure. So I think this is a very common question. I think it depends completely on the business that you're building, right? So if we're investing into like a space tech company that happens to be starting from Japan. It's not like, oh yes, we're like our first client happens to be like Japan. It could be somewhere else in the world, right? But using technology that you're building and hardware that you're building from Japan, for example, right? If you're building something maybe in biotech, Japan is leading the world with gray hair, right? And maybe with health tech, there's solutions where, hey, Japan is leading the world in this, hence building this out domestically as a platform in Japan makes a lot of sense before expanding to the rest of the world. So I think it depends on who the target customer is,
right.
And what makes sense. In the case of Zehitomo, it was a very, it didn't make sense. The synergies of hiring a plumber in Tokyo and hiring a plumber in Paris were very low. It was a different consumer, it was a different professional, and there was some platform synergies, but that would have made much more sense to kind of like inorganically enter another country. So I think every business is going to have its own different approach to get there, but I think one of the most important things is just the competition. And so the more competition there is, the higher a standard you kind of have to keep yourself to. And if the reason for going domestic in Japan, which is often the case, is that you're really not competing with the global players, and so you don't have to hold yourself to as high of a standard, then even if you win the local market, it's going to be hard to compete on the global stage if your product is inferior, right?
Yeah.
And so...
Actually, I think that's how, people just take the easy way out. There's like, oh, that doesn't exist in Japan. I'll just bring... And that's how most, even like all the, cacao... that's how they start. They just copy the idea that exists in the West. Just bring it, and then.
And it's not always a bad way to get started, but it's like, what can you actually do that's going to be better, right? And I think in many cases, like in Japan with Zehitomo, for example, it was like a leapfrog for us, for small businesses, right? In the States, it's not like plumbers were still using fax machines, right? They came along to Craigslist and they came on to like Yelp and all these other horizontal and vertical marketplaces. In Japan, that transition didn't happen. And there was a different demographics and there was a different kind of mindset of the professional. And so we had to solve slightly different problems. But it's okay if we can build the largest business in just for Japan, and it's actually less fragmented in Japan, then we can actually have maybe a higher valuation and buy other players in other parts of the world. So I think for every business, you have a different strategy going after it. But to think that, okay, after you've built a very domestic business and only been focused domestically, that all of a sudden then you can start to do the same thing in other parts of the world, it's a little naive if you're just starting that thinking part way through. And also for your culture and how they're going to evolve. So, but from day zero, if you have a global mindset and you are looking at your global comps and you're competing against your global comps, even if your first users are in Japan, then you're holding yourself to that standard. And I think the reason in Silicon Valley is you have so much competition. You have 10 really, really talented teams all working on the same idea, right? And that's why you then have the ones that are able to then, raise the most and go after the most, be the ones that are most successful. And there's that much less competition in Japan. And so I think as long as you're competing at a very high level, it's fine that your first customers are based in Japan or anywhere else. But you need to be competing and holding yourself to that bar. And I think comparing to Korea as well, I think Korea's actually done a better job than Japan at that. People often cite Korea as being better than Japan going global just because the local market isn't large enough to build as many inroads, right? And so you kind of have to go globally a little bit earlier than you do in Japan. And you do have a little bit more presence, like Samsung's there on the global stage, right? You do have some other startups that, the founders, I think ambition has been encouraged a little bit more than some of the de-risk that had happened in Japan. You can maybe tell me otherwise.
But I appreciate that could be the opposite. Logically, it would make sense because Japan's obviously a much bigger market. So what do you see in like a sort of up and coming, a lot of Japanese founders who wants to start something and they all say, oh, I want to solve all like these type of problems. Like, what are you seeing in that?
Yeah. So, I think first, there's so many talented people in Japan, right? There's also a lot of white space to innovate in Japan. There's also a lot of capital in Japan. So, like, the ingredients are there. The problem, in my view, and this is maybe a little bit controversial, but I think most of the ecosystem is unfortunately like the blind leading the blind, right? If we want to build a decacorn, if we want to actually build the next generation, the next Sony, the next Toyota, right? And unless you have the people that have done that and experienced that, actually guiding and supporting, like if all the support is from people that have taken companies to a small IPO, then that's great. You're going to have a lot of experience with, doing the small IPO. But if you don't have anybody involved, that it's like the people who haven't experienced going global saying, yes, go global, right? And everybody knowing, yes, we want to support going global, right? Same investors want to support, yes, please go after a unicorn, decacorn. We would love that. But yet the feedback and the kind of iterations and the support from the ecosystem generally don't support that in the same way. So I think, saying one thing and doing another is what's happening right now. And so that's why for me, in terms of talking about building this infrastructure for the decacorns, part of that is building the environment where founders can no, it's good to be ambitious, and this is the direction that you can run in. And here's a lot of global investors who are interested in supporting ambitious founders. It's a little bit of chicken and egg with global investors investing in Japan, because often they would only want to invest at the growth stage. They think, hey, I don't have any edge at the early stage. Once this company is at a growth stage, we call $20-30 million of revenue, right? Then I can use my playbook and understanding and kind of make a good investment if they're fast growing.
Right.
But the problem is by that time, they've already been, what I call either, again, controversially, corrupted by the corporates, right? Or the way that you pitch to a corporate and the way you pitch to a Silicon Valley VC is so different.
Very different.
Right?
Very different.
And you're also probably then either already public or de-risking into that IPO.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so for a growth investor who'll be then looking for, the 10x growth from there, they don't want to see the de-risk 2 to 3x into the small IPO, right? They want to plug more capital and go after something larger. And so there's a little bit of by the time it's the growth stage, it's almost too late. Which is why another initiative I'm working on is kind of unlocking secondaries in Japan and providing another, form of liquidity for founders and VCs at a later stage. As a lot of funds are hitting their first maturity.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons there's also pressure to go public is, hey, you have a fund life. You must go public before then. Yeah. And if it takes, 3-4 years to go public, that means you have to start 4 years before a fund life. Which means after your Series A, you have to start already lining these things up. And so it's providing more forms of liquidity in the market. Again, M&A, I think, will come less from the large corporates, even though they're looking at it. And I think will more come from the decacorn that comes out. And the startup mentality buying the other startups. I think that's what's going to create a lot more. So I do think that, building that infrastructure means more global investors also coming at the earlier stages and saying, hey, yes, maybe you don't have the edge in the local ecosystem in the early stage, but you have an edge globally. And we're actually, for founders that are attacking a problem that is a global problem, your expertise is that much more relevant and helpful and important. And there's obviously a lot of great domestic investors as well. I don't mean to kind of generalize, but
I was going to ask, what kind of role does big guys like SoftBank, because they are interested in taking company they just pour billions into even Korean companies, right? So, do they help with the whole decacon mission?
Well, I think they especially after everything that happened in the last several years, I think they have refocused a little bit more domestically in Japan and kind of building an empire here. Even though I guess something was just the other week, that's the hundreds of billions of dollars of innovation in the U.S. But I think that's good because SoftBank is saying, hey, can Japan compete with the world? Because our eyes are also in the rest of the world.
Right.
But how is SoftBank going to deploy $100 million to a Japanese startup when there's so few that can take that type of capital? Right?
I see.
And that's what I mean. That goes back to building this pipeline of very ambitious companies that can take a lot more capital to be risk on and kind of go after that. And I've spoken to numerous global investors as well that their ticket size is $50 million, $100 million. And there's just not that many companies they can even evaluate in Japan. There were plenty in China, plenty in the US.
Right.
China has become harder to invest in. So more people are interested in looking at Japan. But that pipeline doesn't exist. So building that pipeline and then having that be interesting for whether it be global investors or it be SoftBank, whether it be the large corporates, you should be actually competing with the large corporates, right? And if the large corporates actually feel pressures, innovation is coming, then maybe that can also, I think, if we compete with the existing ecosystem, whether it be the large corporates, whether it be the existing players in the startup ecosystem, then that forces all the existing players to be that much better too.
Right.
Forces the corporates to say, okay, hey, we do need to innovate in these areas, or we need to lead, or we need to kind of be more aggressive. It forces the existing ecosystem to say, hey, we need to work at the level of these global investors, or kind of fade into relevance. And I think it will be both, right? I think there's a lot of great investors here that will benefit from having more global players. So,
in your view, where does the company need to be at in order to even qualify to receive these $100 million plus check?
Yeah.
Where, what stage where the company needs to be able to have the capacity to receive that kind of money?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of investors in the States talk about the growth stage starting around $10 million in ARR. That's obviously not enough to take a $100 million investment, but I think that's when it starts to become interesting for more of the global growth investors. And then later on that is, okay, raising $10 million, the $10 million ARR is pretty straightforward. If you have $100 million in revenue, raising $100 million is pretty straightforward. So, I think it's kind of around that size.
I see.
That it becomes interesting, or probably somewhere in between there, depending on the investor. And if you're having more investors, global investors investing $20, $30 million, right? Then it also sets the pipeline for the investors that want to invest 50, $100 million.
Yeah, so like now you've almost like transitioned into this role of like as an investor, you're trying to encourage more founders and companies to go all the way, like not settle at IPO, which is kind of crazy. Think about it if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not that the IPO is bad. It's just that like the goal shouldn't be the IPO.
Right, exactly.
Right, and if the goal is to accomplish the whatever the mission or the vision is of the company, and if say that's going to be a $100 billion company, then what is the fastest path to get there, right? And if IPO is the fastest path, then let it be. But arguably, it would be, instead of de-risking, it's going to be to continue to leverage on risk and to take on more capital and to kind of go after faster and faster growth to be able to get there that much faster. And so, yeah, I mean, how we can encourage and support that, I think part of it is just from the very beginning, before founders get corrupted by the corporates, to have that ambition and to support that ambition and say, yes, that ambition is good and this is a direction to run in, and this is part of the ecosystem that will support that ambition, whether it be domestic or global investors or other different founders or people who have done that before that haven't been engaged. So trying to bring in more successful founders to get re-engaged with the startup ecosystem, trying to bring more global investors to get engaged at the earlier stages, even if they're not investing yet. And then again, providing the alternative to a small IPO in terms of, hey, yes, if your investors need liquidity, there's a secondaries market, right? Whether it be from a new investor investing or whether it be just kind of a purely secondary transaction. So those are like the two low-hanging fruit that I've seen in the ecosystem, just kind of how do we have more founders that are ambitious going after massive markets, and how can we have that alternative liquidity in the later stages. So those are kind of the two areas that I'm focusing on more within that infrastructure. But yeah, for me, it's a theme. And and I think there's a lot of partners working on this theme from different funds or from government. And I'm pretty excited about the direction that things are heading in.
Where does this government policy that I hear, they're trying to encourage more foreigners to come to Japan with a specific intent of starting a company here. So they really want to encourage more founders in general, whether they be local or foreigners. Are they what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I mean, at Antler, we support this as well. Our last residency, we had about 60% kind of international founders and 40% Japanese founders. And I think just coming here, and yes, there's a startup visa and stuff like that, but it's very hard. I mean, if you don't speak the language, if you don't have a local network,
that's what I was thinking.
And it's the question is always, why Japan?
Yeah.
Right? You can start a company anywhere in the world, why Japan? And there's a lot of people who love Japan, right? And I think I'm biased, but I think some of the smartest people in the world and a lot of top tier investors in Silicon Valley and top engineers in the Valley, et cetera, also love Japan because of it being such a high quality of life, right? But what are you coming here to do, right? And I think coming as an outsider to try to change things from the outside never works, right? You got to be here as someone who loves being here and who lives here, and then you can add your kind of perspectives and experiences and kind of create to building. So. Right. I mean, a lot of the people that
like the way you have, right?
Yeah. For example, and I think a lot of people we took into our last residency as well were people that even if they're internationally experienced in background, they're already living here, and they already have kind of an idea. And yet, starting a company anywhere is really hard. But from Japan, it's especially hard if you don't have a local network and experience and speak the language, and also if you don't have the global network experience and speak English. It's very hard to build a globally ambitious company from zero. Right. So how do you have a co-founding team that has both of those elements? And so one of the things that we were doing with Antler by having it be kind of half and half is that teams are then forming. And it was a big experiment. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. But as a result, we actually saw that and a handful of companies that we decided to invest in were teams where, they formed. It was like a Japanese founder and a more international founder that formed. And the Japanese founder was excited because they wanted to build something internationally, but they didn't maybe have that same experience or network. The international founder as well, had reasons to build from Japan based on maybe the market or the industry or for personal reasons, but didn't have that local partner. And so, I think just saying, come to Japan and build is okay, I'm here, now what? Right? And that all comes back to the infrastructure for the ambitious people, because there's a lot of really, really great Japanese founders that just need to have the right, I think, support infrastructure that can say, yes, continue to build out here. I'll give you an example when I talk about all the parts of the ecosystem. I mentioned how investors often have their fund maturity and there'll be a mandate and maybe your shareholder agreement to do your best to go public before then, which means starting very early. But I had a founder friend that was looking to go global, as it were, right? They somewhat successful in the local market and kind of built out a platform, and they saw an opportunity in a few different overseas markets. And so they were getting ready to expand, and their auditor told them, whoa, if you're getting ready to go public in a couple of years, that's going to make auditing you a lot harder. And it sounds risky. You should go global after going public. As if the market is going to be exactly the same in a few years.
Right.
As if going global is like a button that you press.
Right.
And the averages are all the same, right? But the founder ended up doing that, right? Because they're investors and everybody is like, yes, this is, it's a different set of risks and rewards. And I often talk about like, the two buttons that you can kind of press as a founder, right? Is, you've the one button and you can press it and, 99% of the time you get like, $1,000 come out, right? Or, 1% of the time and, $1 million comes out, right?
Yeah.
And it's which button when you press. And it's the large corporates are basically pressing that $1,000 button 99% all the time, right? De-risking into the IPO means getting your processes and structures that you can hit within your PL plans within a certain threshold and kind of pressing these buttons.
And there's only so much the founder could do to resist all that pressure of like.
Exactly. It's just like, It's like all the paths lead to IPO.
So if his is like, no, I'm not going to listen to any of you. I'm determined to, then they'll like.
And of course, and it's not like all the investors, because that was me. I was like, this is ridiculous. Why at the seed stage am I being asked for a PL plan until our IPO?
Well, that's crazy.
Right? Wow. And I told them, and the investors were like, oh, this is refreshing to hear. This is great. We want to support you.
Yeah.
And then they'll go back and say, oh, yes, our IPO target date is this, right? Because they need you for their internal purposes.
I see.
And so it's not that people like in the ecosystem don't think that it's a good idea to go global or to go after something larger. Or it's not that they don't want to support that. It's just that we don't have the framework to support that. We don't have the experience to actually support that.
Now I very clearly understand like what you're trying to do, which I think is awesome because somebody has to do that, right?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's always, again, just like it was with Zehitomo. If someone else is already doing it, great. I don't need to do it. There's so many valuable things to create. And so for me, it's always just how you can leverage yourself to create outsized value using your unique position in the ecosystem. And my position happened to have been like the foreign founder in Japan that understand the Japanese founder mentality and the foreign founder mentality, but also we raised from a lot of great investors in Silicon Valley and a lot of great domestic investors, and kind of understanding the mindsets of both and being able to kind of cross-pollinate between them is something that I think I'm uniquely positioned to kind of create value in.
There's a question that I would like to ask like every founder or like CEOs, but these type of like mindset, whether that's like taking a risk and then just be willing to execute and just like eat glass and just suffer, or some people they fold under pressure, right? Or they just like they're naturally risk averse. Do you think that's something you're like born with, or is it nature versus nurture?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier and easier for anyone to do it if they want to. But I think your analogy, I mean, chewing glasses, that's like the first 5 years it was very much that in hindsight, right? And you have to really want to do it. And knowing that, again, 10 years, like things take more time, energy, and resources than you ever imagine, right? In most cases, right? And so when you set out to do something, and when I talk to founders, like, is this really something that you want to do for the next decade? You spend the next decade of your prime going all in. Like, you can do anything you want in the world. You have one life, right? Like, is this something that you care to do that much?
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to have a certain level of passion. And of course, there are the qualities and the grit and whatnot, but you probably also have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder about something, and you want to prove, yourself, or you want to prove to the world, or you want to prove all the investors that said no to you, or all the people that said this is a bad idea. You're like, well, I'm going to show you, right? Like, everyone is increased motivation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the easy thing to do is to conform to the way that the world works, right? If this is the way the world works, right? Like, why try to change it? The easier thing is to kind of work within that.
Especially in Japanese culture, where culturally, I think people are conditioned to be more like, just don't stand out, so.
Yeah. And so I think, the younger generations, I think, are getting a little bit tired of that and hearing of the lost generations and the lost decades and stuff like that. And so I think, we're kind of at an inflection point right now in the Japanese ecosystem. And so that's where people are realizing, and the government saying, actually, more than any one of the individual 49 policy items that the government put out as part of this 5-year startup plan, the fact that the government said that like we are going to 10x the ecosystem again and that startups are important, like that message was more important than any one policy.
Wow.
I think the signaling to the ecosystem that that's now socially acceptable. If anything, if any of you young people want to have a pension in 30, 40 years, we need to innovate, right? We need productivity of the country.
Right.
And I think making it kind of not only socially acceptable, but like a good thing for the country and almost like a patriotic thing to do was a really, really powerful message. And so I think the more the government can continue to uplift like role models and set more examples and say, yes, this is good to take risks. This is good to do these things. Like people are waiting for that and want to do that. And
I mean, like, I don't want to speak for you, but because you are in that sort of like, what do you call echo chamber where you are always surrounded by the smartest, like top 0.1% of people, like, whereas I do, cause, I talk to like real people, right? All on the streets, right? Like ordinary, and then like what I notice increasingly is that more young people are just becoming more and more hopeless and because they can't get a job, they can't even get internships anymore.
Yeah.
It's like they just like become depressed and they're all on social media, just consuming, scrolling endlessly. And I'm like, well, I think we're sort of getting into that like, you're right, some kind of inflection point. It could be for the positive or for the negative. But for that 1% that's like motivated, like I want to do something different. This is the government messaging, fantastic. Let me take this risk.
Yeah.
But the majority of the population, especially for young people, I feel like it's like going the opposite direction.
I think maybe like in the US and the markets I've seen, there's like a rise of, blue collar work along like, American new grads and stuff.
Right.
And there's, I think, some really interesting trends to look at. Japan, I think, is just still so small that it is up from here in terms of the people that are getting engaged with the startup ecosystem.
Right.
And other people say, it's like, oh yes, but like these companies and like the culture like doesn't fit and match. It's like, that's what you do when you start a company. Like you become the culture of that company, right? And there's probably a lot of people like you that would want to work in that environment and kind of build that out. And so trying to change the existing cultures of large companies, we're starting new companies that can do that and can support that and have it be, by Z for Gen Z, is great and fine. And I think that's like for me really encouraging, when you're having more talented people kind of start these companies because it creates a kind of career path that didn't exist before in Japan.
Right.
And it creates a kind of whole part of the, like new industries are born and a new kind of generation of people that are learning what it means to build is born as well. And it's so different from the traditional image of large corporates. And, large corporates are evolving as well. A little bit under pressure to kind of, digitally transform and now AI and they all have their corporate venture arms. But again, it's still a lot of learning. And I think the fastest way and best way is to compete. So I take to your point that I think a lot of people are, look at, okay, are AI overlords coming to, rule the world? And, what hope do I have as a mere human? But I think that, there's more and more opportunities to get involved in entrepreneurship.
Right.
And like when I was hiring at Zehitomo in the early days, the first Japanese person that I hired that I mentioned that our investor introduced, part of it was like, how do we not convince him, but convince his soon wife and their in-laws and they're coming into a real company. And it's like, oh, can you talk to our investor to hear that we're like a real company? Like those are the challenges that we had. And I think it's changed so much from then or last decade and the direction that things are going in right now,
I see.
Is quite positive. And so I would just encourage anybody that was like, there's so many directions to build. And there's so many kind of exciting people building in other different areas. The average startup salary is now better than the average kind of large corporate salary. And so it's not even like, oh, I need to kind of work at a convenience store or something like this. Japan, there's more jobs than there are people, right? If anything, it's one of the reasons Japan has potential to lead a lot when it comes to AI. There's less resistance to AI taking over jobs because we're a declining population. And so I think there's a lot of really interesting things that are going to happen from Japan. And I think, again, I'm encouraged by reveal people that are like, I'm tired of hearing Japan is not at the top of the world, right? And I want to build out.
But at the same time, not everybody needs to be the founder or CEO, right?
Oh, no. You have to really, yes. And I think 99 times out of 10, that's when you join the startup, right?
Yeah.
And
because you get to learn so much, and then plus people, like I think even just a few years ago in Korea, they're not even familiar with this concepts like stock options.
Yes.
Like equity, what is it? I'd rather just get more money. I'm like, no, equity is a good thing.
Same here, yeah. So I mean, that education is starting to happen as more and more people go through it, and that's what you had in Silicon Valley, right? It was equity that made things happen, right? It's talent attracts talent.
Yeah.
So great people are going to attract other great people. They're going to all have equity. And the more great people that are together, incentivized in the right way with equity, are more likely to succeed. So they become very successful. The equity becomes worth a lot of money. They start their next companies, right? And then now they're experienced and talented.
Yeah.
And they attract the next generation. And that kind of, iterating very quickly is what's created a few generations of entrepreneurs. In Japan, if people are with the company for life, even as the founders of these companies they take public or continue to be the CEO for decades, it doesn't kind of, and you didn't have as many stock options in the past. So all these things are starting to change, right? Stock options, now it's oh, that's a risky thing. It's people are starting to have more education around this. But when you have, your neighbor or some random person is oh, Joe, made $1 million working at Startup. He was a pretty average guy. I could probably do that. Then you start to get people, excited from that side as well. Yeah. But I do agree. It's 99% don't need to start a company. They can, but having more companies means that there's more different types of cultures and more different types of things that people could be interested to work at, as opposed to just being depressed and giving up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just visiting a WeWork space the other day for some meetings and interviews, but I realized that everybody, even at co-working spaces, is just wearing suits. I was like, wow, okay, that's something I wasn't expecting. Yeah. And I felt so inappropriately dressed for meetings because everybody's wearing suits. I'm like, oh, okay. Because Japan does have that sort of a suit culture still.
But WeWork's also not a startup shared office here, right? It's higher end of the market in Japan. Right. So, I think there's maybe global startups that want to have a presence here, can use it and stuff like this. But, yeah.
I see. Yeah. So right now, you sound like everything you're doing sounds like it's so helpful to Japanese society at large. I feel, Japanese government could really use your help in amplifying this message, right? But do you have any bigger goals, or are you pretty happy where you are?
Yeah, so right now the goal, I always think it's really helpful to have a North Star, and so right now it's building the infrastructure for the decacorn.
Yeah.
And as it gets built out, or if there's other people building things that I don't need to do, then that may be the case. But right now, there are so many initiatives that just kind of taking on, and it's always a challenge to prioritize time, right? And you always end up becoming more busy than you want. But I wake up every day and I look at my schedule, and even if it's packed, it's these are all things that I want to be doing. Wow, yeah. And so I think I'm really fortunate to be in a position where I feel hey, I can leverage my unique experiences to create value in, hopefully at more scale.
And you also invest in them as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. So investing in kind of new startups that we're launching at the earliest stage.
Yeah.
And then kind of investing all the way through to support them there. Working with, I was overseas for kind of half of this month, kind of talking to global investors around the world and draw that interest to Japan, where Japan hasn't been on the global stage as much. And then, also working on secondary deals and kind of trying to bring the best practices from overseas to Japan for later stage liquidity. So those are just where I see myself to be highest leverage at the moment. But if I have a team that's able to execute that, or if there are other people that are doing as good or a better job, I don't need to do any one of those specific things. But right now it's definitely a collaborative effort, and I do talk and work with the government and all the different parts. Anyone who wants to help support that initiative, there's a lot to be done.
Looking back, if you had to pinpoint the most challenging moment that just push it right to the edge, can you recall some of those moments where, maybe you talked a little bit about this in other interviews and things like that, but you just felt so shit and oh my God, this is too much even for me. But how did you actually get through that?
So there have definitely been a lot of hard times. A lot of them have been fundraising related, right? I think fundraising is all good, and it, maybe falls apart last minute, and then, how do you raise and how do you, make things happen and keep the company alive? But it's always been anytime you're in a really tough situation, or anytime you're going to start to question is this worth it? Does this make sense doing this? What I always recommend to other founders as well, and what's helpful for myself is to remove myself from the situation and say, okay, this is a company right now is going through a hard time, right? Is maybe struggling to raise or whatever it might be. If I have no obligations to this, right? And it's not because, I've, promised I'm going to do this, or I have all, my chips are all in. If I'm outside of this, right? And I could do anything that I want, what would I do? Right? And would I take this shift and kind of steer it on a course? Like, is that more available given all the challenges that are associated with it? Or would it make sense to start that from scratch or do something completely different? And if you think that you should be doing something completely different or start from scratch, then like, you probably shouldn't be doing that, right? Some founders will just continue to try to keep something alive and it stays a zombie just out of pure obligation. And they ended up not really creating that much more net value for society or for themselves or for their shareholders.
Actually,
over time.
I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
And so for me, every time it's like, well, no, I still believe in this for these reasons.
Yeah.
Despite all these challenges, this is still so much better of a starting point than starting from scratch. Hence, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make this work.
Right.
And make it happen. And that's always been the conviction that I can make it happen.
Yeah.
No matter how, and there's been multiple times that like the normal thing for us as a company would have been to go under.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And our investors are like, well, yeah, like you did your best and that happened. And I think it's only because you have the confidence that this is really needed by the ecosystem, that this is something really important and impactful and has the potential to become a massive business. And because that conviction is real. That
and not just your belief, but also probably a lot of like positive reinforcement, like people actually utilize it. So it's like, yeah, that's how I'm adding value. So you get that, you're not just dreaming or.
Oh no, sure. I mean, but like every stage, it's a different challenge, right?
Right.
And obviously as we have more and more traction, that can speak more and more for itself. But
so basically, your solution was to kind of separate yourself out and have that perspective.
Yes.
Then it's like it's not worth starting all over because I still believe in this thing.
Yes.
I know if we just get through this, we're going to be okay.
Yeah. I mean, and it's having the confidence to want to lead that and to continue to want to spend the next decade working on that, right?
Right.
And I think it was just a really helpful kind of mental state to kind of confirm for myself. Because you want to be like intellectually honest with yourself and emotionally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to do when you are leading something and when you are all in something and you are the face of something.
When do you know it's time to walk away? No matter how much you believe in something, like there are like maybe every sign that says that this is just not worth pursuing. I'm sure you came close to many of the situations, but other than your conviction, like for any other founders out there, is it like at a point where it's just worth, you know what, you've done enough?
No, I think there's always more that can be done.
Okay.
And I think if your like mental health and your physical health is at risk, right? I think that can be very dangerous. So I think maybe that's the only thing I can think of actually.
Right.
If you have conviction on this space, then that's what you're doing. You're trying to change the world, which is not easy by definition, right? And of course, at the beginning, everyone's going to say you're crazy, right? If not, it would have already been done.
I really think that more people need to hear this message, especially young people that are like even interested in pursuing any opportunities in this field. Not just from Japan, but just from everywhere, right?
And the future is going to be built by next generations,
right.
For the next generations. And I think, we're in a really exciting time that we're living in right now, like this time and place in history.
Yeah.
And I think, particularly in Japan, being at this inflection point that we talked about is really exciting as well. But what's happening with AI right now and this shift and how fast things are accelerating, like everything is like that we know or most things that we know will fundamentally change. And there's a few things that won't change, and we should be kind of aware and conscious of what those are.
What do you think some of those things could be? The things that will never change?
Right. Oh, I mean, like the importance of like human relationships and love and kind of, whether it be, humor or shared experiences. I mean, I think there's a number of things. And I think it was Amazon or Bezos that kind of said that once in a very famous way. It was, always kind of think about, what's going to change over the next 10 years. People often talk about that, but people don't talk about what's not going to change over the next 10 years. Yeah. And so in every industry or wherever you're innovating, kind of understanding what are the rocks that are kind of, studied there, and then what's going to change and how you can kind of lead that change to a good place. And in the future that you want it to be.
Yeah. People resonate with your message, but then they look at you as like, I don't have a tech background. Like I'm not as smart as Jordan. I don't understand anything about AI. And I'm not even interested in starting a tech company, right? Because usually a lot of people think that only building a tech company is the only way to build a unicorn or decacorn companies. But, they might just be really passionate about plumbing, let's say, right? And I think that we're going to see more of those, businesses that are real blue collar work type of thing, as you said, but then for those people, they cannot even think about generating like $100 million revenue, or is it possible somehow?
Well, so I mean, part of that comes back to education. Part of that comes back to your surroundings, right?
Right.
So if you're in the middle of the valley and everyone is in the startup ecosystem, you're probably going to have a better understanding of stock options and kind of other things. But you learn in different ways, right? I do think that education is kind of fundamentally broken, right? The conveyor belt that we have from first to second to third grade, and like everyone learns the same thing in a classroom setting. And I do think there is, like, when you start unbundling our institutions or our different kind of infrastructure that we have for education or otherwise, I think there's gonna be a lot of new things that pop up. And so I wouldn't take anything for granted in this day and age. And I do think that understanding what you're passionate about or what you want to build towards, I always like having that North Star and then reverse solving from there. I had a shareholder who told me when they decided to invest, like, I've seen this pattern before, and they actually pointed out, and I realized, like, I'm an introvert that learned how to be an extrovert. Like, I was never one that would go up on stage and talk about something, right? I loved not being near people and programming a computer, right? And not having to deal with emotions and all these different things. And so, but I learned how to pitch and communicate my message because it was important, and I needed to do so to be able to raise capital, to be able to hire a team and to kind of bring the best people together to have the best chance of accomplishing the goal that I wanted to accomplish. And so I think that everything is just like a function of how you get there. And the goal is not to be like a tech entrepreneur, but a goal, whatever your goal is, whatever the North Star is, whatever you want for the future, you want the future of your kids and the next generation. And when you look at that, understanding, okay, what is your fastest path to get there? How can you most contribute in getting there? And as you start on that journey, then you realize, okay, maybe now I need a team to do this, or okay, now I need to drive growth. I need to kind of, raise money, and it's going to create that much more value over time. And you learn, and I always learn the hard way. So I learned by doing, right? It's hard to kind of understand what $100 million of revenue, means until you have, until you're actually planning and building that out. It's hard to understand what unit economics mean until you actually have money going in and money going out. And so I learned a lot of things the hard way, for sure. And people have different ways of learning, but learning by doing, I mean, they say a startup is the new MBA, right? For a reason. And,
so people just don't have to be like, they don't even have to quit before they get started saying, oh, I don't have a tech background, or you
gotta be curious, right? And curious people are going to have a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts and look at a lot of different things. And the more
for me, ironically enough, I just don't think people even have the sense of curiosity anymore, that they just become like a bunch of sheep where, they just do what they're told, right? And maybe that is a function of an education system, like feeding, like, hey, do this. Like, they don't even learn critical thinking, which I almost see that as a life survival skills now, right? They don't know how to think critically. They don't know how to solve problems. They don't know how to tell stories, and then all these essential things.
You're absolutely right.
So then that's the first step, right? To be curious, to think critically, but then I think they actually even need role models for that. Because
I mean, you want like a kid to be able to ask as many questions as they want. You want you work in a corporate, it's like, oh, these are the rules, and it's gonna be like, you should want to know why the rules. Like when I started Zehitomo, I was like, reinvented everything with HR. It's like, well, why do we have like 100-page document that needs to simulate the world? Why can't we have one page that everybody actually knows and understands? And it turns out we could, and we made that right. There's instead of taking things for granted, learning and thinking from your own first principles and the future you want to build is becoming easier and easier in this day and age. And especially with the access to the internet, especially with the access of, what AI is providing for everybody. I think it's, when there's a will, there's a way. I mean, that's a little cliche, but
I think so. And I just hope that, if this conversation that we're having can even reach that one potential person who's going to start something or take a risk and just do what they're passionate about because they want to solve something. I think it'll be, we could use a few Elon Musks, or actually definitely a few more of you for sure.
No. I mean, I think, everyone's curious and go out. I mean, what do you have to lose, right? I always think, going back to...
Well, people think that there's a lot to lose though, right?
Think back, when you're old and retired or on your deathbed or whatever, and you look back on life, what are you going to regret?
Right.
Are you
going to try telling that to 20-year-old kids who's like...
Yeah, but are you going to regret having not tried something? Right? And if you're going to regret it not having tried working at a large corporate, then great, go work at a large corporate, right? There's nothing wrong. There's a lot of great things to learn there. There's a lot of, large industry that's built there as well, right? So it's not that entrepreneurship is the path for everybody. Working startup is the path for everybody. But I think, living life without regrets. This one life.
So this is your, maybe you could explain this one more time, but your regret minimization framework. How does that work, and how should people implement that?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is what I was just saying is like, imagine you're on your deathbed
Yeah.
in 50 years from now, and who's going to be around you and what are they going to talk to you, but also yourself, like, are you going to have regrets?
Yeah.
Like if you're at a fork in the road and you have to make a hard decision, which decision are you going to like regret more? Right. And it's, yes, you're going to have maybe both things that you want to do, but you can't do both things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you going to regret trying to do both and then have them be kind of half-assed?
Yeah.
Or are you going to regret having done one and missed the other? Right. And so in my case, when I was starting the Zehitomo, I was like, okay, I'm going to regret if I don't prioritize family, right? And I'm going to regret as well if I leave this job that I love where I'm really rewarded and given a lot of opportunities. I'm going to regret if I don't take this massive chance. But I can probably only do 2 out of the 3, right? And the regret of not prioritizing family was been greater than the regret of, of leaving a job that I loved.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I made my decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is some amazing insights that I was able to get. Hopefully, the viewers find that this informative and insightful as well. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for chatting. It was a lot of fun, and I think Japan is, again, my biased view, one of the best places in the world to live, and it's great. And a lot of people
that's
are
hard to
here.
dispute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And yeah, really exciting time when it comes to startups and innovation. So, if any global investors thinking of coming to Japan or founders to build here and stuff like this, I'd welcome you with open arms. So.
How should people contact you if they have an interesting idea?
Yeah.
And obviously you invest in people as well. So
yes,
how should people get in touch with you?
So I'm there on LinkedIn. You can find my profile. On X, I do it is all in Japanese, but you can reach out to me there as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
Hopefully talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks,